Good morning, Lena.
Good morning. How are you doing?
You're beautiful.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, first of all, I want to speak about space
Sure.
because, yeah, in the beginning, when we see these beautiful pictures of the space that has been taken by Hubble, we think to ourselves that space is a wonderful place with its super clusters and nebulas and pulsars. But then, when you go there, you cannot change your mind. It's just a new thing, you know. It's dark, it's scary, it's silent, or at least we can hear it. And it seems like everything in there is just working against you as a human, starting from solar flares to cosmic rays.
Well, I was with a group which proposed a telescope, a solar telescope, to fly on an early Space Lab mission. And I raised my hand to be the payload specialist and was fortunate enough to be selected by the scientists of the science team to fly. So my view of space and human space flight really matured as I matured.
What about the ignition that happened in the beginning? You know, when the main engine ignited and you had to perform an abort to orbit emergency procedure. Wasn't that scary?
Well, of course, it's amazing experience when they light those rockets. I don't think that the space flight experience changed me, but it changed everyone else in the world. Because now I am somebody that beautiful woman from Egypt will call up to talk to. And you would not have done that if I hadn't gone to space.
Yes.
The change in your life is profound. Not so much as because it changes yourself, but because everybody else views you in a different way.
Yes. We all hear about some of the consequences, and especially the medical consequences of flying to space. So they're always saying that if you go to space, you will be, for example, the cosmic rays may damage your DNA and may cause cancer. And actually, recently there was a study. If I can read it for you, it was just a new study about the medical consequences. This was published a week ago. That says space travel causes herpes viruses to resurrect inside astronauts. Virus reactivation rates appear to increase as time goes on.
It took a few days for me to adapt to being back in gravity. But as far as any physical changes to my vision, to anything at all, I can sense no changes.
So you were planning to go to the low Earth orbit or to the geostationary orbit, and you had to go to the low Earth orbit?
At the time I flew, there was no space station. I flew in 1984.
Oh, really?
And so the missions at that time were restricted to how long the space shuttle could be in orbit by itself.
Okay, so just you flew back in 1985, and just a year after that, 1986, you know, the disaster happened of the space shuttle.
Yes, and the Challenger disaster changed everything.
Yes.
After that, NASA changed the program. They didn't fly for 3 years. After Challenger, spaceflight changed dramatically. There was more concern about the safety of the spacecraft, things like that. The time I flew, everything was working fine and nobody worried, and then Challenger happened.
No, but I think after that, when they flew Columbia to space, there were some payload specialists there. I think maybe 2 or something of them.
Yeah, what about the payloads?
There were some payload specialists there. They flew.
Oh yes, there were still payload specialists, but pretty soon they stopped flying just ordinary scientists.
Oh.
Yeah, they call them payload specialists, but the payload specialists were usually career astronauts.
You know, manned space missions, let's not call it manned space missions because, due to gender specificity, according to NASA. So human space flight has always been have always created a controversy. So some people are against it from the fact that, first of all, it's expensive. Second of all, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Third of all, some people think of it as it's not that necessary. Even if you're talking about space exploration, we have our landers or rovers or robotic crafts that can really do the job. So why do we need to sacrifice human lives? But on the other hand, like specialists and scientists are saying that actually we don't have any, like what a scientist can do in 8 days, it would take a rover or a robotic craft a year to do. So what's your opinion of that?
Well, my opinion is that both sides are correct. We don't need humans in space for any scientific investigations, everything we do in space, except study humans in space. You got to have humans in space if you're going to study humans in space. But as far as the piece of work you want to do, generally humans are a disadvantage and they cost a lot. On the other hand, humans are a curious and adventuresome animal. There is something in the human spirit that responds to this kind of challenge. And I think it's important that we as humans have challenges like this.
Okay, my opinion is that taking risk is part of science. So even
yes,
you had Carol, the one of the astronauts that flew with you, and then he died on Mount Everest, right?
Carl and I, sure.
Yeah.
Carl had waited 17 years to get his flight. He was a scientist astronaut in the Apollo program, and he never got a ride. Finally, he got to go, and it was a joy to fly with him. I mean, he was so excited. He took thousands of pictures. So Carl was a great guy to fly with.
But then he died on Mount Everest, right? So
he did. He went up there. His family recognized that this was a risk, but Carl wanted to do it. He wanted to do three things in life. He wanted to have a family, he wanted to fly in space, he wanted to climb Mount Everest. Well, he got to do all three.
He got to do all them all. But it's just a tragedy, But he is.
Oh, yeah, it's a tragedy, but hey, what a way to go.
Yes, he is a hero.
Yeah. I think I would have flown on the shuttle if I knew I wasn't going to come back, because the whole experience was so special to me to get to do that.
Your flight was also part of that space race, because the space race wasn't over until 1991, until the dissolution of the USSR.
I never saw it as a space race in those days. And if you remember, the first U.S. proposed space station was called Freedom,
yes,
which was obviously a Cold War name. But thankfully, we got out of that pattern and began to cooperate. And the cooperation on the International Space Station has worked remarkably well. Even though there's a lot of stress between the U.S. and Russia now in the political side, we're getting along just great in our space station operations. Would you like to go?
Of course, I will.
All right, I will nominate you.
Okay. Actually, 2 days ago, there was a meeting between, I don't think it was a meeting, a conference, I think something like that, with Jim Friedenstein and Mike Pence, the vice president of Trump. So they were discussing going to Mars and all of these things. So they are already planning for it.
Well, you got to be careful about what these politicians say.
Yeah.
Don't just listen to their words. Look at the budget. The budget that NASA has is not adequate for what they promised to do. Pence said we're going to be going back to the moon in 5 years. Pence's speech was not like John F. Kennedy's speech. John F. Kennedy says we're going to go to the moon, and the money was there to do it.
Yes.
I think it was the 25th or the 30th anniversary of the moon landing. All of the American space flyers were invited to the White House by George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush president. And we had a barbecue in the backyard of the White House to celebrate this thing. It was great, a lot of fun. Then we went down to the Air and Space Museum, and the president stood up there behind the Air and Space Museum and gave this speech that said, we're going to make a priority of going to Mars. I mean, that has been so many years ago and nothing ever. So every presidential speech is not the same.
Yes, you know, there is something about the politics getting involved in science. You think it's for pure scientific reasons or because of this like ideological superiority that they were looking for?
The human space flight isn't done for science. It's that you're going to have these people doing this, let's use them for science. So it's, I would like to, before we're done, I would like to have you meet my wife.
Oh, yes, for sure. That would be a pleasure. But the Russians, they have another, like...
Well, they have different systems, and their systems have proven very reliable. We did have one aborted mission, if you know about recently, when they had to blast the crew off the top of the rocket with the escape rockets. I don't know what went wrong there, because I haven't followed, but I think it is understood what went wrong. And we're flying again, so I guess it must be. But the Soviets, the Russian systems are really quite different than ours. They tend to be more rugged, and they tend to do the same thing hundreds of times, so that it's like a automobile assembly line. They just crank these rockets out, these spacecraft out. And it's a very reliable system, but it is also limited because it hasn't been improved. Keep in mind that NASA has never built a rocket. NASA has always had a contractor build rockets. NASA doesn't build rockets. NASA gives away money. So the new crew compartments that SpaceX and Boeing are building are equipped with escape rockets so that if something goes wrong on the pad, you can blow off the crew compartment like the Russians did and like we were prepared to do on Apollo. Crews like this, crews like to have an escape capability, and the new capsules all have that. So it's a safer system than the shuttle was. The shuttle was never a safe system. It was always questionable whether you would get up and get back without something going wrong that was lethal, and we saw that in the two disasters we had with Columbia and Challenger.
But they knew, like the NASA administrators back then knew what's going, like something is wrong. Like they know, for instance, about the Columbia's foam problem when it hit the lift wing. So they know about it already, that it might happen.
Well, for instance, on the O-rings were observed to have had some burning on them well before the Challenger disaster. The O-rings on my flight had some burning, but not enough to leak. So once you have such a massive system moving forward, it's very hard to say, hey, we need to stop and fix this little problem, because it looked like maybe we can get away with trying to fix it while we're continuing to use it. So bad decisions were made, both that resulted in both accidents. Both accidents were because of the ignoring of known problems.
Yeah, you remember the question?
Your opinion is as good as mine.
Yeah, yes.
I think that we are potentially entering a time at which people will be able to pay money and go into space. I think within the next few years, you will be able to give money to Virgin Atlantic and take a ride, not into orbit, but up high enough that you can claim to be astronaut and have, 20 minutes or so of weightlessness. Well, at least 5 minutes of weightlessness. I think it'll be quite a lot longer before the ordinary person can buy a ride into orbit, because that's a lot more challenging technically than simply going up high on a rocket and coming back down. But I do believe that we will have some kind of commercial access to space. And that's what is the new era. India is sending off things to the moon, and the Chinese are talking about sending people to the moon. And so this is a new era. In some sense, it's a new competition. And this may be fun because people in the USA, the politicians, they understand competition.
Yes.
And that may free up some additional money to do some of these things we're talking about.
But but the thing, what's the problem that, as you said, that we always have these expectations for the future, and we say we will do what we will do, but like we still need longer time for them. So actually, Emirates is one of the countries that has already signed a contract with Mr. Stein to send their first astronaut this year. So
I would have been happy with paying the Russians to launch our astronauts. But the Russians like it. They like it. It's a good deal for them.
It's $82 million per one seat.
Yeah, that's right.